All right, Jamie, take it away.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. We are going to talk about collective impact, both generally, and then also a little bit about what it looks like in the North State, and then a tad touch on towards the end of like how that really relates to community schools and the community schools work. So today we have myself. You're honored with my presence. Aren't you all excited? You usually see me on these calls because both North State Together and Partners for Rural Impact are part of the North Star RTAC. So all of you as community school leads and the Shasta County Office of Education, specifically Rosemary, all make up this technical assistance. And that was designed when we put in the application for RTAC, specifically around both the expertise that Partners for Rural Impact brings around community schools, but also the expertise they bring around collective impact work, and then the work that we do from cradle to career collective impact in the North State region. So it was very intentional. We were able to last month take all of the what we call county network leads for the collective impact teams in the region and do a 101 on community schools with them so they could really understand what community schools was and how the roles they might play. And then today we're going to go over what collective impact is so that you all know, hey, maybe this is something you want to partner with your local cradle to career collective impact teams. Where are there synergies? Where does it align? We want, from our standpoint, of you all to be thinking of that stuff organically, of like, how might you match? We, as a North Star RTAC team, both at PRI and North State Together, and then of course Rosemary, already see a lot of alignment. And we hope by the end of today, you will see the alignment of where collective impact and the teams can play a role in the work that you all do, whether it's just taking the model of collective impact and applying it yourselves, or really working closely with your county collective impact teams, which we'll go about in a little bit. You've all met me, but I'm Jamie Spielman. I'm Director of Planning and Development for North State Together. I'm what we call the long old standing director, because we've been around since 2016 and I've been around since 2018 at North State Together. And we've brought in a lot of new folks recently around some initiatives that we're working on. And I have now a co-director who I believe is on the call. I'm not going to call her out too much, except to say that Amy Speakman is my co-director, and she primarily serves 5 of our new counties that we've been launching the last a little over a year, I guess it's been. So that's who I am. That's the role that I play. And I work really closely, not only through North Star RTAC, but in other ways with our national partner, Partners for Rural Impact. And so I'm going to kick it off to Katie, who's going to lead us through, introduce herself, and then lead us through some basics of what collective impact is and why we do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. And like Jamie said, I'm going to give sort of a bigger picture overview of collective impact and then let her speak to what that looks like on the ground in your communities in California. But I'm the Director of Community Results at Partners for Rural Impact. I feel like I need to let you all know that my current headshot that you see here, a bunch of the other options from that day of headshot taking was me petting the cows who are on the college farm that are next to our office. So I just feel like I wanted to bring that back into this space, but you got the more professional one here. But I work at Partners for Rural Impact. We're a national organization. We got our start and still work in Appalachian, Kentucky, where we work in 54 counties in Eastern Kentucky, doing really deeper work in 31 of those counties. Doing everything from federally funded programs like Gear Up, full service community schools, the whole gamut, and also now taking a collective impact approach. So what does it look like, not just to run grants and run good programs, but to take this different sort of bigger picture community approach? And so over the last couple of years, we've taken what we've been learning for more than 25 years in Eastern Kentucky and expanded our footprint to provide TA and capacity building support to rural communities across the country. And I'm super excited about the partnership we have with both North State Together and the North Star RTAC, and really joining forces to bring about some really amazing things in Northern California. So that's who I am, and we will just jump right in. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jamie. So as we think about collective impact, which might be a phrase that you're super familiar with or sort of familiar with, I want to set the context a little bit. And so the context is that the work that you all are doing in communities and regions and counties, we're thinking of population level result. So not just, yes, or also not familiar with. So not just what does it mean to improve things for a few kids or a few families or a particular group, but what does it look like if we imagine shifting results for an entire population? And what we know about sort of the issues at hand, the complex issues at hand, is that you can't make measurable change in a place in silos. And so taking this approach of aligning action among partners and stakeholders, all of whom have a shared interest in that result. Our population level result at PRI is all rural students succeed. We know schools can't do that on their own. The United Way can't do it on their own. PRI can't do it on our own. Individual organizations and concerned community members can't do it on their own. So we need a newer, different approach to really align those contributions from lots of players and stakeholders across a community. And you'll see one of the first steps you can take towards that aligned action is creating a shared results action plan. So what does it look like when we're really intentional about coming together, figuring out what's the issue at hand we want to solve? What are the existing things that we have in place, assets in our communities? We know that communities have a lot of assets, a lot of things going for them, but they might be working separately from each other. What would happen if we planned out how do each entity's contributions line up and support a shared vision for our communities? And again, kind of this is a big one at the bottom. This process requires partners and stakeholders to move from competition to real collaboration. Often in the neck of the woods where I'm from, a lot of small towns, places of persistent poverty, where there's been sort of this message for a long time that there's competition. There's not enough for everyone. Can be a scarcity mindset. But what happens if we move from that mindset of we're competing for scarce resources to we have a lot of resources if we only aligned them or reimagined how we use them, that we might have enough or close to enough to support the change that we'd like to see in our places. Next slide, Jeannie. We also know that in communities, and it seems like now more than ever, there are families and kids who have a need for additional resources. And we know that sort of getting there, we have to acknowledge lots of things that are at play in our communities. Things like different beliefs, the systems and structures that are in place that keep inequitable things moving, the behaviors and practices of both individuals and organizations, and recognizing that all of those things in a real complex way contribute to sort of the current day inequities and disparities that we see in education. So if you grow up poor and you've had lots of generations of poverty in your family, that's not something that happened overnight. There was lots of systems and things in place. So how do we, in order to shift that narrative and to shift the experience of kids and families in our communities, really acknowledge the complexity of what brought us here, and then take a more kind of nuanced shared responsibility for shifting that for our kids and families. Next, please. Oh, this one maybe has an animation on it. Like, what will it be? Surprise, there we go. And so we often use this kind of cartoon to start things. I'm going to give you a second just to take a look at it. Read it. I'm curious if this resonates with anyone. I see some heads nodding. What about this resonates with you, given your own experience in schools or communities? And you're welcome to come off mute and shout out. But you don't have to shout. That's kind of aggressive.
Just that we need to improve at all levels. It's not one specific area, it's several different areas. So it does need to be a multi-pronged approach.
Awesome. Thanks, Jade. Anybody else?
One thing I'm thinking about looking at this is the way everybody's turned and pointing instead of, perhaps holding up a mirror.
Ah, yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
like
and
it.
so go ahead.
I like it too, where we used to say that we put up signs in our staff lounge and that where our parents send us the best kids they have. They don't keep the better ones home.
Mhm.
And so we just got to work with the ones we have, the ones that they send. So yeah, I like that someone said they're all pointing at somebody else rather than, well, let's just do what we can with what we have.
Yeah. I love that's a powerful statement that parents are sending us the best kids they have. And how do we take what we have to support them and nurture them? Thanks, Brian. So I want you to hold this image in mind because we're gonna circle back to it in a roundabout way in a few slides. But hang on to this and this idea of everyone pointing to someone else as holding the responsibility for improving outcomes for kids. So if you go to the next slide, Jamie. And to build on this, we know that to get a kid kindergarten ready reading on grade level all the way through graduating from high school and moving on to some sort of post-secondary success, we know that takes a whole village, right? Which is why you all are so invested in this community school model. What does it mean to bring a whole community around kids? And also that these problems, again, are complex. Helping kids to succeed in school and get all the way from kindergarten readiness up to post-secondary success, whatever that is. There are a lot of factors at play. Everything from, you can see some of these here, things like we know that if kids don't have stable housing, if they don't have access to great, easy to access healthcare, if they have other forms of instability in their home or learning disabilities that are unaddressed, all those sorts of things can come to bear to make a really complex problem. And that's just for an individual child. If you think of an entire community of kids and families of how all of those complex issues are interwoven, that's a lot to sort of navigate and peel back to figure out how we can best support success for kids and families. So remembering that these are complex problems, that it's not just the kindergarten teacher who's going to fix things or the social worker who's going to fix things or any other number of people or entities alone who will fix things. These are very complex problems. Next slide, please. And so what we really want to think about then is how do we take these fragmented pieces? Just sort of that example I mentioned a minute ago, if a child and their family doesn't have safe housing, if they don't have regular access to food or medical care. Here in Eastern Kentucky, we have so many families have been impacted by the opioid epidemic. They have parents who are incarcerated or unable to care for them, all of those layers. With different resources addressing different parts of those complicated things, where again, blame is abundant. There's not a lot of accountability for, we put in place this program, but we didn't actually see if it really worked and we just kept doing it, right? So those sorts of things. Knowledge and resources not readily shared, competition. If I apply for this grant, that means you can't get this grant, right? So what does it look like if we shift that thinking from fragmentation, blame, competition, to one of collaborative action? And I think this first point is probably for me, if I had a favorite bullet point on this slide, it's shared ownership of problems, right? Which leads to shared accountability. The complex issues that our families and kids face didn't happen overnight and they didn't happen in isolation. What does it look like if we share responsibility for improving well-being for kids and families? And if we share that ownership, I might not have individually created a situation that a family is in, but I can own being part of the solution in a really concrete and tangible way. So you can read the rest of the bullet points. The other one that I'll mention specifically is around action rooted in data. I think oftentimes we keep doing things because it feels good or it seems like a nice thing to do or a good program without really seeing, is it actually addressing the issues that we want to solve in a concrete and meaningful way? So really thinking about, what does the data tell us about the reality for kids and families in our communities? How are we designing and creating solutions and strategies based on what that data tells us? And then how are we using data to measure impact and adjust our sails a little bit on the way if we need to? Next, please. And this one I'm just going to touch on really briefly. Person role system framework is also acknowledging that for each of us, each of you, and the work that you do, you bring yourself as a person, whether you're a lifelong Californian or a parent, and a Libra, if you're me, if you're left-handed, like whatever those qualities to bear, if you have a particular faith tradition, all those things that make up who you are, that also shows up in the work you do. You can't just check that at the door, but the work that you do, you're filling a particular role that's contributing to the shared work. And you're doing that role within a larger system. And we know that the work that you all do, especially in community schools, is really rooted at the intersection of so many different, like big complex systems, right? There's school systems. And I know you have sort of the local county level system and probably within a specific school building, and then a state system within a broader kind of federal sort of education system. And then systems like the housing system play into that. The legal system, all of these systems, right, are coming together. And you all and the work of the other folks on the ground in community schools are really at the crossroads of all of those systems. And so thinking about how you show up as a person and in your role to impact change within those systems is just something I want to kind of have you hold on to and think of as we go to the next 2 slides before I hand it off to Jamie. So this is a tool that we use often. It's called Results in the Center. It's a tool that comes from Annie E. Casey Foundation's Results Count framework. And so as you all move forward in your community schoolwork, I would really encourage you to use this. Oftentimes, when we try to come together to collaborate around a particular issue, what we might put in the center of our chart here might be a school, might be some sort of entity or organization. And I want to encourage you to think of the result that you're holding for kids and families and put those kids, those families, that shared result in the center. So while community schools are really centered around the school building and that sort of school ecosystem, that all of that is in service of impacting kids and families. So when we come together, you know, rallying around kids and families in the center rather than a particular institution or organization, how does that shift our thinking and the work that we do? And also a reminder, you know, for schools, especially in rural places and small communities, really are such a bedrock and a center point of an entire community. My son attends a community school. It's a K-12 community school. Everything happens there. When COVID happened, that's where you went to get food, right? There's a clinic. You can go there to get vaccines. When there's a major thing in town, like that's where the parade starts for Christmas. Like everything happens at the school, right? It's really the heart of our community. And we know that schools can't do this alone. Schools everywhere are they don't always have what they need to do it alone. And that's why this chart for me is a helpful reminder of how can these other entities come and rally around kids and families along with you. Human services, you see faith-based, nonprofit, community, philanthropic, all of those things, thinking about what does it look like if everyone brings their particular contribution and rallies around the shared result of improving well-being for kids and families. Like, what does that look like? What does it look like not only to have public health, but the local private pediatrician's office is on board, right? What does it look like to have one of my favorite stories here in Eastern Kentucky? A woman started coming to some of our community meetings, and she wanted to think about how she could help get kids ready for kindergarten. She was a manager at the local Pizza Hut. She was always like, I don't have a lot to offer because I just work at the Pizza Hut. I don't have a lot of formal education, so there's probably not much I can do. But she had this idea once she learned there are certain things that families could do with their kids on a monthly basis to help them get ready for kindergarten. She had this idea, what if we put all of those on a sheet and we stapled one of those sheets to every pizza box that gets delivered? Because she was like, I know on Friday nights in our community, so many families with young children order pizza and we deliver it. What if we put some K readiness tips on our pizza boxes? Brilliant. And so I share that story, like the manager at the Pizza Hut has a role to play in improving educational outcomes in her community. It didn't matter that she didn't have, you know, enough of a formal education or particular like fancy title. She used what she had, a small business, and a willingness to help to figure out what could her contribution be to improving educational outcomes for young children in her community. So I just encourage you to hold this, like who else can rally around. Some are pretty obvious and some, like Pizza Hut manager, might be a little more unlikely, but still have really valuable contributions to make. And then if you want to go to the final slide of this section, Jamie, this is a new reimagined version of the cartoon that you saw earlier. I will pause and let you read that, and I'll let Jamie, if you want to say a little bit about where this version came from, and then I will hand it off.
Thank you, Katie. That was great. Yeah, so that the image that Katie shared earlier is something that a lot of, if you go to Collective Impact 101 session, it's shared pretty widely throughout the nation. And we were a few years into the work and really wanted another graphic to say what can it look like? What does it look like? In some of our communities, we've already gotten a long ways towards this in our collective impact work, that we at least don't have finger pointing anymore, right? That we're at least going, we have that shared result in the center. And so we had James Crandall, who does a lot of our data work and our graphic work at North State Together, redo it with the idea of what should it look like? What do we want to see with our collective impact results, with all the players and stakeholders at the table? No longer, he didn't change the pointing anymore, but it's in a very good way, the pointing. And then now, I think Katie Session, thank you so much for that, Katie. We asked her fairly last minute to come and talk to you all so that to just get that broad picture of what collective impact looks like, and the approach looks like for whatever it is that we're working on for our kids and families, in this case, community schools. And so she talked about that no single organization, right, no matter how powerful or innovative, can solve complex problems in isolation. So that's the very basis of what collective impact is. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, and how we're structured here in the North State for most of our counties, with a little sidebar of a couple of counties that are not part of the North State Together Collective Impact Network, but we work closely with in our outlining counties. So who we are. So just like Katie talked about, we're a Cradle to Career Collective Impact Partnership, and we have 10 unique county network collective impact collaboratives in our region. And so again, you know, that operating premise is that we're all coming together to work on what that center result is, which is increasing outcomes for our students and our families in our region. And so our model is a little bit different. So if you look at, let's say, we have Erin on the call. Erin sits on Glen to Greatness up here on the right. That's a collective Cradle to Career collective impact in its own right. But because we're a rural region, we look at it a little bit differently and recognize that our rural counties don't necessarily can hold the supports all on their own. So we come alongside with this regional support framework to share best practices and that overall regional vision. So you'll see a bunch of organizations that you cannot read unless you have eyes far younger than mine around each of these county networks. Those are those cross-sector, you know, philanthropy, business, industry, Without a doubt, your county office of ed is sitting at these tables. School district leaders all across the economic and workforce development, first 5 sits at every one of them. So you'll see that they're already coming together, some of them for a very, very long time, around increasing educational outcomes in our community. So I mentioned that North State Together was founded in 2016, but we've had Reach Higher Shasta here in Shasta County and Expect More in Tehama that were founded before North State Together's existence. Back in like 2008, 2009, they had their beginning. So they've been doing this cross-sector collective impact work for a very long time, and have really robust programs, and winning just a couple of weeks ago, Reach Higher Shasta won a state Bell Award with our work. So I mean, it's very, some of them are very, very advanced. And then Glen to Greatness has been one of our newer county networks, really organizing around this collective impact model for all that they do. And I'm going to go here. So I'm not going to go into this model too much, but just know that there's 5 basic conditions of collective impact. Continuous communications, mutually reinforcing activities, that common agenda, that result that we're talking about in the middle, that Katie mentioned, and then a shared measurement system. So one of the things that we do at North State Together is hold a lot of these conditions for our rural region to ensure that we're all measuring cradle to career impact the same way, and that we're gathering the data. We're structured, you'll notice that the RTAC team, the North Star RTAC team, is structured actually very similar to how North State Together is structured. That was by design. So each of you are a community school lead. We'll talk about this in a minute. We have county network leads in addition to you all that work on the cradle to career collective impact space over a huge wide region, right? Across many, many square miles with not very many people, but lots of cows. And so our backbone role, so that is a function of collective impact, is having a backbone. And we have a multi-layer backbone approach, which we'll talk about in a minute. But our role as a backbone is to guide that regional cradle to career vision and strategy, making sure we're not only establishing shared measurements, but that continuous improvement process around our data metrics, supporting aligned activities. It seems like from the state of California in the last couple of years, and going into at least, well, you know, with the state budget, but at least the next few years, we have a lot of resources that are coming down that really need some alignment around that. That's one of the roles that we play. And then, of course, you'll see here, there's a lot of arrows going on. There's a lot of continuous communication that happens between the North State Together backbone team, our county networks, the flow amongst each other, and back up to the regional level for communication. And then we work a lot in the policy space, both at a state and federal level, which actually can very much align with number 6, which is mobilizing funding and resources. So the state of California is particularly interested in a regional model lately. I know many of you are at your county levels, maybe even looking at a community school consortium application, right, to all go into this together. I think at a rural area, this is becoming particularly more and more timely, as some of our, you know, Brian, I think, is the assistant superintendent at County Office of Ed. He's also the community schools lead, right? He's got 10 different hats there in Lassen County. That's so true for most of our rural regional area. And so to be able to hold that capacity at the regional level to apply for a grant or disseminate grant information if it makes more sense for, let's say, MODOC, Siskiyou, and Tehama just went for a federal grant together. So combining efforts where it makes sense. So that's a lot of what we do. And then the cultivating community engagement happens a little bit at the regional level, but a lot of that is at the place-based county network level. So if you've never had a chance to go to the Expect More Tehama annual summit, it's a prime example of like what that looks like at a county more localized level. So our backbone.
We've got a question.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see this chat on my screen. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Jamie. This is Aaron. I'm just curious, a couple slides back, and actually you have it here too, with your hub, the wheel here. how did you position yourself as the backbone when some of these agencies were already in effect, reach higher and expect more, like you said?
That's
I'm just wondering if it's a fair comparison to say, how do we position ourselves as the backbone as a community school when there are obviously other entities doing similar work, right? So I'm just curious how the graphic looks great in theory.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how you guys made that move to become the backbone. And
So I think that's a twofold conversation. So if you're talking about community schools backbone, which right now is being held, just the technical assistance by RTAC, if we're just talking technical assistance, which has a lot of the similar role, I would say, as North State Together does with a collective impact cradle to career work. But as far as how we came into existence, that's a very good question. So what was happening is a Retire Shasta and Expect More Tehama were independently formed on their own. Okay, as collective impact. One is a very grassroots community-based organization in Expect More Tehama, where folks sat around the table and said, we got to do better. This was not education sitting necessarily around the table. It truly was just community going, how are we going to have better outcomes in Tehama County and Expect More? And what can we do as community members to make that happen? And they grew Expect More Tehama out of that in about 2009, 2008-ish. At the same time, Retire Shasta definitely had, it wasn't called Retire Shasta, had people pointing fingers, literally agency to agency going, who the heck is the problem here? Who's sending kids that are not prepared? And then they finally had I shouldn't say come to Jesus moment, but they had a moment where they said, this is not working for our kids, this pointing fingers. They actually went off to a Strive Together, which some of you may or may not know, but Strive Together is like the national, well, it's here on the slide, our national framework that both Partners for Rural Impact uses as a cradle to career collective impact, and North State Together and other cradle to career collective impact uses as a framework. But they went off to Strive Together early in 2010 and go, that's what we need to do. And they came back and said, we need to frame ourselves around this different collective impact model in our county. And then there was lots of conversations happening between that time, 2012 and 2010, 2012 and 2016, when we were finally formed as the backbone, to go, these are working really well, but nobody has a paid job to do this, right? And so that's the word backbone also implies that there's some paid staff that are dedicated to this work. And the McConnell Foundation was working really closely and watching what Retire Shasta was doing and Expect More Tehama was doing, and said, we will fund and pilot a backbone to scale this to the 3 other counties that the McConnell Foundation funded. And so that's where the 5 original counties, we call them, were formed. So we added MODOC, it's called Advancing MODOC, Cradle to Careers for Siskiyou and Trinity together into our model. And so they've been around for some time now and learning from best practices, the folks that have been around longer, our national experts. We've been growing the capacity of our backbone team. And then in 2022, as Aaron well knows, because he's been heavily involved, the state of California said, we love this model. We're going to fund some regional work that we have doing around implementing the recovery with equity strategies from a regional level. The state put out a huge report and said, this is what we want to see after COVID happened. And then also some pathway work. And then that's where the healthcare and education pathway work that North State Together and really our county networks do. And that's how we were allowed to expand that collective impact model into 5 new counties. So when we talk about our county networks, we have folks in all stages, right, that have been around since 2008. Summer was on a call with Expect More Tehama earlier today with us, and about how they could work together. That's going to look a lot different than, let's say, Lassen County, that's fairly new and really focused at the moment around creating a new dental healthcare pathway in their county. So hopefully that all answered your question, but it really was around capacity. Like, where is the neutral body that can house this regional work? We know that MODOC County I work with Tanya as a powerhouse up there. Advancing Modoc is doing amazing things, but they can't hold all that data work. They can't hold that consortium, $18 million grant application for the region. They don't have enough people or resources to apply for funding or work at policy levels. And so that's really the approach that we hold, is just, being a Strive Together network member takes a lot that Glen to Greatness currently couldn't handle on its own, for example, but can get the value of it by being a part of North State Together. So clear as mud. Probably not, but just know that we're set up this way for our rural region. And then when we built on the North Star RTAC, we said the same thing. I mean, the state put 13 counties together and said, here's a region, and do all this work. And there's no way a technical assistance could be, every school district in our 13 county region either. So it's very similar. Today is really about like, what is collective impact, the pieces that you all can take as community school leads, like the ideas back onto on the groundwork with, talking with schools and implementing the ideas. And then also, how could you potentially, if you see alignment, go to Reach Higher Shasta, who is doing cradle to career work and has all the partners already at the table, and align with them if you're in Shasta County or whatever county that's displayed on the screen. So I hope that answered, Aaron. If not, okay.
Very informative. Thank you. I have more questions, but I'll table them for later. Thanks. Yes.
And this is only, I will say the first conversation of, we hope, are many to come, of aligning some of the work. So here you've seen your own screen where you have Aaron and Brian and everybody listed as a community school lead slide. This is that similar slide, but who are your county network leads for each county? Oh, Aaron, you're listed because we have to have two. So there you are. You'll see Aaron is both listed as a Glen to Greatness lead, and he's also a community school lead. This is not surprising in our small counties where you have really good people wearing lots of different hats, right? So this is the contact information for all of them. And then of course, Rosemary and I both act as that conduit between these. So we can set up meetings and have further conversations with the county network leads of each county that are listed on the screen, and you will get the slide deck. Okay, so Katie talked a little bit about how all of our all these big systems change can be addressed through the collective impact model, right? And we're specifically focused on education. That looks like helping a lot of different areas so that our children and families can thrive, especially in the school system where you're talking about community schools. And I think one of the things that when we first joined in with the community schools efforts is like just really acknowledging that the state of California, I'm going to read it actually, because it was just on there. Hold on just a second. So the state of California, our idea here is that school systems can't do it alone. You've heard that over and over again. I'm sure you've heard that in other spaces around community schools specifically, but it's also around our collective impact cradle to career work. And that by working together, we're going to have better outcomes, right? And that is absolutely the operating premise of North State Together cradle to career collective impact work. And I'm going to read what the community schools program is in the state of California. And it says, the California Community Schools Partnership Program supports schools' efforts to partner with community agencies and local government to align community resources to improve student outcomes. These partnerships provide an integrated focus on academics, health and social services, youth and community development, and community engagement. And to me, there's absolutely alignment to the work that, whether it was this morning on the call with Expect More to HEMA and community schools, but the partnering with what's already being done in your counties to have the biggest impact, especially I think in our rural areas where it's often the same people. It's often the same community-based organization that you're working with and the same contacts. So they're built in. And they're sitting there from a cradle to career standpoint with that same result already at the center that community schools has. So I think going forward, we're going to see more and more of alignment as we work together. You know, like I said, this was a kickoff call to talk about a little bit about collective impact just with the community school leads. And then we had the Community Schools 101 with the collective impact leads. And then a little teaser, we hope to bring you all together in person in February around some of that results-based framework that Katie was talking about. And Katie's going to come out. Can I divulge any of this? I don't know if I'm allowed. We got to talk to the director of community schools. She's all that. So
We previewed it last week, so they know.
okay, but there you go. I'm not spilling any beans. So I think if we look at this, collective impact provides, and we also look at it from the standpoint of community schools provide, right, is better prenatal care, more pre-K programs, kindergarten readiness, right, all the way up through just better jobs and community vitality in our individual communities in our counties. We're all working for that same goal. And I'm going to show this little slide too, that this is the same cradle to career spectrum that we use at, that we use at North State Together at each of our county networks, look at from a data standpoint. And then certainly Partners for Rural Impact uses this, our Strive Together national framework uses this, but also, community schools create, I think, that necessary conditions for this to actually happen, right? And so we're all looking for the same improvement across our cradle to career continuum and how we can best work together to do that. And I don't know if I have any more slides. I didn't think I wanted to torture you too much. Okay, so it is 2:50. I know that Rosemary wanted more time at the end, but I do want to make sure if there are any questions questions that we get that answered. And I can't see the chat for whatever reason, it's hiding from me. So are there any questions, Rosemary, in the chat?
We're hoping that you'll be able to share the slides.
Yep.
Of course. And I'm curious if other folks have questions. One thing Jamie mentioned is that we had a meeting with Expect More Dama and our CCSLs in Dama County. So we have that thing planned in February where a lot of us will come to the same table. But if you want like a specific meeting just between you and your county leads, either before then, after them, Jamie and I are happy to help like facilitate that and get it up and running. We would be actually delighted if you wanted to do that. So feel free to reach out and let us know and we can make sure we get that scheduled.